Alright. Let's see what Phelous has to say about Resident Evil 6. I did a playthrough of Resident Evil 6. It's a fun game. I'll certainly take it over Resident Evil 5. And it does have some replay value, that's for sure. From what I understand, he doesn't really hate that one. But let's see what he has to say.
What? What is this? I know it says Resident Evil 6 on it, or 6 Resident Evil, but after viewing what's on here, I still have to ask, what is it?
Resident Evil 6.
Resident Evil 6 is both really fun and really annoying, so it's not surprising there are reviews out there that praise it and bash it to hell, and of course I'll be doing neither. One positive I can give it right from the start is zombies. Resident Evil 6 actually has zombies in it. Though it seems
Yay! Am I the only one that prefers zombies over plagas?
kinda strange that I need to point out there are zombies in a Resident Evil game. Zombies, however, are not the only enemy in this game. In fact, you won't even fight them like at all during Chris's campaign. The other enemies are C virus infectees. So we've had T, G, and C viruses, huh? Well, I guess we still got D, E, P, and Z viruses to come. And I'm assuming that the V virus was the Veronica virus. I mean, otherwise that's the loser virus. Loser virus sandwich.
Oh my gosh, stop with the sandwich jokes!
Have more intelligence, so they'll actually fight with weapons, and some upon damage mutate. You know, kind of like someone with a plaga in them. So basically, we got plagas again without actually having plagas. C-virus infectees' body temperatures elevate upon damage, of course meaning up to the point where they nicely burn up upon death, making the game not have to remember where their bodies are. Though, for the system's memory's sake, I suppose it makes sense, as a lot of areas will constantly spawn enemies until you move on. So, you know, for the same reason, zombies melt. Like Resident Evil 5, 6's controls feel...
Well, to be fair, we're not at PS4 territories yet.
pretty similar to Resident Evil 4's with the same over-the-shoulder view. But Leon's scenario is the one that felt most like Resident Evil 4 because despite having the same controls, there is a different feel to everyone's scenario in this game, particularly Chris's. And fuck Chris's campaign! Like Resident Evil 5, most of this game is spent with a partner. Leon is teamed up with the Secret Service agent Helena. Chris is teamed up with another soldier from his group, the BSAA Peers. Sherry Birkin, the little girl from Resident Evil 2, who has grown up now and become an agent with Jello physics, which just seems all kinds of wrong. Teams up with Jake Mueller.
Yeah, Sherry Birkin is all grown up, and while it is sweet, I really cannot view her as attractive with stuff, because to tell you something, I love Resident Evil 2 and my mind is still set on Sherry Birkin as a little girl. And yes, years has passed and she's all grown up, but still, my mind is still set. Yeah.
Albert Wesker's son, a fact he discovers during the events of the game. And Ada teams up with no one. Hers is the only single-player only scenario. And if you were playing this game by yourself anyway, it doesn't change a whole lot up, just there are no doors that you need. Game by yourself anyway, it doesn't change a whole lot up.
I'm not sure where, but I suffered one small glitch where he decides to run around in circles in my playthrough. I'm not the only one that had this issue? Okay, if anyone has played Resident Evil 6 and has experienced someone walking in circles in the playthrough, please let me know.
Just there are no doors that you need to wait for your partner before opening. I didn't end up playing Resident Evil 6 with anyone, but I did play through 5 with a friend, and these games are kind of similar, so despite what you think of the Resident Evil series at this point, these are fun co-op multiplayers. And thanks to some of the changes in 6, I think it fares a bit better than 5 would for single player, and the computer partner is fine. Most of the time, anyway.
What?
I did run into a couple times where I had to run back and grab my partner after getting to a partner need to open door because they were apparently running into a corner or something.
Hurry up! Yeah, I know! Pierce! Yeah, I know!
I never had this issue, but I will agree that the AI is much better here. At least my partner switches weapons, unlike Shiva for Resident Evil 5.
Hurry up! You don't have to tell me twice.
Oh, and my computer partner decided one time that they had something better to do and didn't grab me in time, making me die.
Here! Roger! Over here! Chris! What do you think of that?
I never had that issue.
Quiet, they'll hear you.
It wasn't a constant problem, but that was a bullshit sandwich.
Phelous, if you're watching this, I hate the sandwich jokes. Stop it. You're the one that's ruining the joke. And if any of you disagree with me, go screw yourself. Anywho, I never ran into the AI problems. Am I the only one lucky enough?
What was a constant irritant to me was getting comboed by an enemy before I had the chance to do anything, and it would happen on the ground a lot too, where if you can't get into aiming mode, you're just stuck. And for that matter, fuck these parts where you had to run around and try and find items while avoiding those enemies that regenerate and won't die. I hated it every time it came up. Another constant irritant was trying to make precise movements. When you're right beside something you need to click on to move on, I found my character running past it over and over. The only parts of the game where you walk slowly are scripted parts of the game, and those are actually just really annoying because there's no point to it and you just want to run again.
Okay, yeah, I have to agree. The slow walking segments are just stupid.
Problems with just moving around was the camera, as sometimes it'd swing around in a way you didn't want, and there were a few parts with a fixed camera that just felt wrong and you'd end up running all over the place before getting your bearings again.
Yeah.
Same thing went with trying to take aim while under cover. In fact, it felt so bad I almost never used it. Because maybe taking a hit to run up and kill the enemies quicker was far more worth it to me. Which leads me to one of the things that felt better in this game, the melee attacks. In fact, if Resident Evil was still a survival horror, these would probably be too good, as if you have a good amount in your stamina bar, you can just run up and pummel a lot of the enemies pretty easily. I'd even do this if they had a gun, just running up and beating them to stop them from shooting was usually a lot quicker than a shootout. Also, the dazed and stealth attacks you perform are pretty fun. Some of the zombies even have convenient weapons hanging off them to grab. Leon, I think that axe might be really powerful, especially against living things. Better take it with you. Or not.
Yeah.
That's cool. Whatever. And like I'd mentioned, these combat mechanics might be a problem if this game was more of a survival horror, but of course, following the trend going from 4, it's not, and I really miss the more survival horror aspects of this series. It's like I said about Resident Evil 5, these games are still fun, but they really don't feel like Resident Evil anymore. Resident Evil 6, for the most part, feels very linear, as you often just follow a path to your next waypoint, and because it's set up that way, I often found myself just making a mad dash towards the next point instead of fighting, as it would be a lot quicker and the better way to go, usually. And while Resident Evil 4 kind of set the trend for the more action-y take on the series, I wish they could at least go back to Resident Evil 4 in terms of feeling like a survival horror.
I'd argue that Resident Evil 4 is just not scary at all, aside from one or two creepy enemies.
And in terms of locations and feel, Leon's scenario captures this the best in 6, while Chris's captures it the absolute worst. As I stated ever so eloquently earlier, fuck Chris's campaign! Because the C-Virus infectees, or Javo as their nickname, maintain control, they can do things like fire weapons, and that's who Chris is up against the majority of his story, and it ends up feeling more like an army-type game instead of Resident Evil for the most part. I got so annoyed with Chris's campaign, I found myself just rushing through it to get it over with. At least in the Ada and Sherry scenarios, their little twist on the gameplay was some stealth moments, which helped to slow things down a little and gave it a bit better feel. Particularly in Sherry and Jake needing to avoid the almost indestructible creature Ustanak. It felt a lot more along survival horror lines and reminded me of Jill trying to escape Nemesis in 3. One of the other aspects of the game is... It's quick time events. I'm not really fond of quick time events unless the action need to be performed feels intuitive, and some of the ones in this game are just confusing about what they actually want you to do, like whether to hold or constantly press a button. If you don't want to have to deal with them, though, you can shut the majority of them off during cutscenes if you choose the amateur difficulty, so at least that option is there. And speaking...
Oh, there was an option to turn off the QuickTime events? I did not know that.
Of not knowing what to do, this game will sometimes throw things at you without really telling you what to do, and then you just end up wasting time, and it's not a fun challenge to try and figure out. It's just annoying. There's a spot during the last boss fight with Leon where I wasted a lot of time because they specifically mentioned it was trying to cover its face, and I thought I was supposed to try and hit it in its face when it would be slightly revealed, until finding out I was supposed to be shooting it where its legs are attached. And in a spot where Chris and Sherry's teams meet up, there's a giant boss you need to pull some machinery out to hit its weak point, and I had no idea you need to hop over to it by a ledge, and ended up killing it just by shooting it a lot. Luckily, by the time this came up in Sherry's campaign, I tried it the correct way. There's also a few points in the game where it gives you a split second to perform the right action, or you die. The checkpoints are never far off, at least, but it's annoying when it feels like you've performed the action required, yet are stuck doing it over again. Now, for another positive, I love the way the stories all connect in this game.
Oh yeah, me too.
You run into every other character during one of the scenario's playthroughs, and you get to see it from the other person's view during their game.
Is that you?
Sherry Birkin.
Yeah, I love this. I love that they connect to each other.
C-virus antibody. Looks like they're not alone.
Now, for the stories overall, again, I find Chris's to be the weakest. There's a lot of tragedy in it, but it never feels like the characters you're supposed to feel bad about him losing are developed enough for you to really care. Leon's story is pretty solid for the most part, though I feel towards the start he's kind of out of character.
Always valued your friendship, Leon.
Stay right where you are. Mr. President!
Yeah. You know they're infected, just shoot them.
Don't make me do
That-
this.
This is Leon. He knows better than anyone that once they're turned, it's over, and just because it's the president, he almost gets Helena bitten. There's even a moment where he wants
Exactly.
to go save some idiots already getting bitten when he knows it would be too late. This scene's especially weird just coming off Damnation, where Leon acted the exact opposite in these situations.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Luckily, though, that's just towards the beginning, and he feels more in character afterwards. Helena, though, kinda gets the shaft on development, I felt. The story with the best actual character development was Sherry and Jake's. Wesker's son Jake was someone I was actually worried after just getting a few glimpses of him during other people's stories that he'd just be someone with a chip on his shoulder and be annoying, but he actually develops pretty well. And teaming him up with Sherry Birkin was a good move, as her father, William Birkin, was who developed the G virus and turned into a monster as well, so it gives them common ground. Though anyone else find that Sherry grew up into a blonde Rebecca?
Oh, I can't believe it.
I enjoyed Ada's story.
That never popped up in my mind, honestly. I'm just more fixated on the fact that Sherry, the little girl who pretty much can't carry a weapon, has to run and hide from the Chief Irons, or just swim move the zombies and dogs, is now grown up into being an agent that shoots guns and stuff.
As well, but there are clearly two Adas in this game, as people will see her 1 second wearing this and then another second this, yet no one ever comments on it. It seems especially silly when Leon even sees the birth tape of her doppelganger. And that's not spoilers, unless you're as unobservant as them. Overall, though, I can say I had fun with this title. I would, of course, like to see the series return at least a little back to its survival horror roots, but at least parts of this game captured it a bit better than 5, and of course others way worse. And there is a lot of content in this game, with 4 different story modes to go through, being around 4 hours each, so you get plenty of gameplay. It's not the best, but it's also not the worst. If you liked Resident Evil 4, there's a bit for you here. And if you liked Resident Evil 5, well then, yeah. But personally, I'd like to see another Resident Evil executed like the remake.
Thank gosh for Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 2 make. Now, what's this post-credit?
Anyone else find it kind of annoying to get extra games as downloads? I paid over $80 for this. Put it on a damn disc.
So, you could download that game? If you buy Resident Evil 6 or its extra package, you can get Code Veronica. I mean, technically, I would just use an emulator when the time comes, but it's still a little weird. Also, those who like Resident Evil 5, they're wrong. That's all I need to say. Yeah, I will admit, Chris Redfield's playthrough in Resident Evil 6 just feels like an army type game with Resident Evil in the title. But it's far better than Resident Evil 5. I didn't run into many issues, as Phelous pointed out. In fact, I don't recall running into them at all. I probably did in my playthrough, but I never encountered those same issues. In fact, the only thing I can think of is that one character decides to run in circles. Seriously, did anybody ever encounter that? And also, Ada Wong's playthrough being a single player only, I don't know. When I was playing through that campaign, there's this second guy who's referred as agent or something. Agent, like I'm an agent. I think he's discount hunk basically, which does make me wonder. I think Ada Wong's playthrough is a 2-player co-op. It's just that if you decide to play alone, you're basically alone. But it doesn't really matter much. I intend on playing it alone. Whether or not I'll let someone play with me online is beyond me. I might consider doing that in the future, assuming if I'm up for it. I mean, I find myself playing Resident Evil 6 many times, mostly to play as the second character. Yeah, Phelous hasn't played the second characters. Something I've noticed. And the second characters are fine for the most part, although I find it funny that Helena has 2 shotguns that fires different bullets. One fires blue 10-gauge bullets, while another fires red 12-gauge bullets. I mean, I love shotguns, but having 2 of them and fire 2 separate bullets? What? One more thing before we end. Stop with the sandwich jokes and stop making the berry jokes. It's not funny at all. Anyway, please consider liking and subscribing if you like what you see. And have a good day or night. And take care.